Sarah, you're back with me again this week. Thanks very much. You've got 2 questions for us this week.
Yeah.
Will we just jump straight in?
Let's go for it.
Go for it.
Hi Eoin, hi team. This is a pension related question. So I'm a contractor, so that means I don't work 52 weeks of the year. Some years I do, some years I don't. But when I'm working, I pay into the CWPS. When I'm not working, I don't pay into that. Now, as well as that, I pay into a personal pension. I pay a sum of money into that every month without fail. So I have a personal pension and I have a CWPS, Construction Workers Pension Scheme. So I have one of that. So that's 2 pensions. Is this mental? And am I better off just keeping one pension? Grant, thanks.
Okay, you're probably not familiar with the CWPS.
No.
And just to remind our listeners, Sarah's in marketing.
Yes.
You don't have QFA, you don't have
No.
any of that stuff. You've never been in this world before.
No.
But CWPS is the Construction Workers Pension Scheme. I think is what it is. It used to be called the CIF actually, but it's Construction Workers Pension Scheme is my understanding of what those letters stand for. And when you're on a job, one of the things you have to be careful if this guy was to dump one of his pensions, it's not mental, by the way, first of all. Like having 2 pensions, pensions typically are charged on a percentage basis.
Okay.
So if you're being charged 1.5% a year on 100k, or you're being charged 1.5% a year on 50 grand in one pot and 50 grand in the other pot, it's still the same amount of money. There's a slight...
I'd say that's a lot of listeners would have that question in different jobs that would have pension schemes set up.
Yeah.
You know, should they be having 2? But it's the same.
It's the same. Like
there's no fixed amount.
Yeah,
of money.
in general. Now, there's some very, very unusual circumstances where you get charged a bit more.
Yeah.
And some pension schemes might have €8 a year to a levy that has to be paid on them per scheme, but that's €8 a year. Like it's not going to change your pension pot dramatically. The other thing that this question often gets tied into is I've loads of pensions from previous jobs.
Yeah.
And should I put them all together? I don't agree with putting them all together, okay? Because if you leave them separate, you can draw them down at different times. Yeah. And it's a percentage anyway. You're not going to save money. There's no economies of scale by putting them together.
Okay.
The interesting thing for him, if he was to cancel his Construction Workers Pension Scheme, the CWPS, there are some jobs, okay, particularly state jobs. My understanding is you won't get onto the job. You won't get the contract if you're not in the CWPS scheme. Now, if someone wants to correct me on that, I'm more than open to correction on it, but that's my understanding. And that was fed back to me by somebody who was in it, who was out trying to get work, particularly state work. And they says, if we're not CWPS, we won't get the job. And so he needs to be careful, particularly because he works for himself, that he doesn't cut off his nose to spite his face. And it's percentage based anyway, so it doesn't matter. And it's not, I think he said mad or mental or something is what he said. It's not.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. We go for the next one.
Let's do it.
Hi Eoin, I have a question on pensions. I currently work in the private sector. I'm putting away 20% of my salary into a pension each month. My company also matches up to 7%. Because it's a group pension scheme, we have a dedicated broker or person that advises on the pension. My question on that is there any questions I should be asking my broker or any advice on how I go about investing that pension? Currently, they have advised that I'll have half my pension sitting in cash, earning, some interest. I have asked them to put a quarter into high risk and a quarter into medium risk, which has done quite well this year, but they keep wanting to advise me to be more risk adverse. And I'm just not quite sure of what the schemes are or how well they're doing or how well I should manage the money. I am only in my mid-30s, so I want to try and build as much wealth in my pension pot as I possibly can. And I suppose my theory would be to go for the high risk stuff early on in life, and if it ever takes a dip, I have plenty of time to make that up. So I suppose my question really is, is there a better way to understand all the schemes and all the different investment routes you can go down when it comes to pensions? I find it a bit of a minefield, and the information online is not great. Thanks very much. Really enjoyed the podcast.
Wow, there's a whole episode in answering that question. Like, there's so much there. What do you think we need to concentrate? What do you think his real question is there?
The real question, I think, is should he be investing in high risk?
Okay.
Investments now?
Yeah, investments. That's fair. So first of all, what I'd say is he's 50% of his money is gone into his cash fund,
Yeah.
right? He's probably losing money on that, even though the interest rates are going
Yeah.
up. He's probably losing against charges. He's probably losing money. 50% in medium risk and 25% medium and 25% high, I think is what he said. That's just a mess, if I'm honest,
Yeah.
right? Like that, and the advisors are telling him to be more risk adverse, was the word. I wonder, did he make a mistake
Yeah.
there?
I
think
was kind of shocked at that when I was listening to the question, because it seemed like they weren't listening to his wants and
Yeah.
his needs.
Yeah.
Because he seems like he is.
open to going.
yeah.
But they want him to turn down the risk volume.
Yeah.
They're saying risk averse, more risk adverse. They want him to turn down the volume. I think it needs to go the other way.
Yeah.
And I think this is a perfect example of the pensions world, the investment world, in my opinion. And this is my opinion. It's not prosperous as anybody else's.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the investment world and the professionals in it make investing overly complex to create jobs for themselves.
Okay.
Okay? It does not have to be this complicated.
Yeah.
Like if that person just went in and said, what are the charges like? So what allocation rate? He did ask at the start, what questions should be asked? What's the allocation rate look like? What are the ongoing charges look like? If he's not getting 100% allocation, he has a problem. If he's not getting in and around 1.5%, if it's a big group scheme, he'll be getting a lot less than that. But in and around 1.5% is acceptable. Okay? So they're the charge, 100% allocation, and in and around 1.5% or a lot less if it's a big group scheme. And then what are my investment choices? Okay. Now, if the charges are astronomical, what I'd be suggesting to someone like that to do is bring his contribution with the work scheme down to 7% so that he gets a 7% matching for work. Okay. And with the extra 13% that he's currently put in, go buy a private pension for himself, right?
Yeah.
It'll have to be what's called a PRSA AVC, but he can do that with any advisor, any broker can set it up for him and just drive the charges down on that 13%. Don't walk away from the free 7 from the company.
Yeah.
Right. Take that, but then do it. But then, when he goes to make his investment choices, let's simplify it. Like, totally simplify it, right? If he went into a no-brainer 60-40 portfolio, and Sarah, you haven't been working with us too long, so you may not have heard me spout on about this before, but that basically means 60% of his money gets invested in the best companies in the world. He buys tiny bits, buys shares in, and it wouldn't be unusual with a 60-40 portfolio to end up with exposure to 10,000 different companies here.
Yeah.
Okay. So you buy tiny bits with 60% of your money, and 40% of your money goes into bonds, where you give a loan of your money to companies and to governments. Okay. And when he looks at that statistically, what will happen is if he leaves it alone for 5 years, he's a 99.6% chance he's going to have a positive return. If he leaves it alone for 7 years or 8 years or 10 years or any period of time beyond 7 years, there has never been a period of time beyond 7 years in the last 100 years where you would lose money invested in a 60-40.
Okay.
And this isn't the prosperous way of it. We kind of pull from that. We do a few other bits and pieces with it, right? But this isn't, I'm not talking about the prosperous no-brainer 60-40 portfolio.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about no-brainer 60-40 portfolio. It's a generic thing,
yeah.
right? It's just a style of investing. And what he's done there is he's taken all the risk off the table. He's just completely simplified it for himself. He is in his 30s, I think he said, right? So therefore, he can go, there's loads of 7-year periods. There's loads. He has a 30 plus time horizon here before he retires. And then he has another 40 years to get to until he gets to 100 years of age. This money is going to be invested for the next 60, 70 years. Yeah. Okay. And that's a really simple way of doing it because he's de-risking the whole thing. He's spreading the risk across thousands of different companies. Yeah. And he's simplifying it, which is the most important thing. If he's not going to get decent advice, that's the advice. If he's not going to get decent, specific advice for himself, that's the advice I would give him or anybody else there. Mm-hmm. Keep it simple. Yeah. Leave it alone. Yeah. I'm just wondering what I do think though there was a really important question he asked in there. Should I put it high risk now and then reduce the risk as I get closer to retirement?
Because I would kind of think that I don't want to scare you with I don't have any kind of pension set up. I need to probably think about it in the next couple of years. But in my mind, I'm still a teenage girl and that's like too much for me. I'm like a teenager in my 20s. But I would think
Sarah, you do also, you know what, you need to take a step back and read your employment contract for Prosperous.
I know.
Because you are actually getting one. It's just you don't get it on day one. So just to be everyone's out there going, doesn't McGee give people jobs and then doesn't give them a pension? Him of all people. You are going
yes.
So you will be getting this.
Yes. But I would think that makes a lot of sense to me. It would be invest high risk when you're younger because it's not your money that you're going to need in the next 5 years that you're playing around with.
So the more risk you take, the more potential return you can expect. Okay, that makes absolute sense. Yeah. And the thing about it is that most people, though, when they go really high risk, when they look at it, they get very scared and they pull the plug on it. They just move it all to cash. Geez, I lost lots of money and move it all to cash, right?
Yeah.
So that's why 60-40 is a bit of a smoother ride, and it's less likely the person's going to do the wrong thing at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. Okay. And that's why when you don't have an advisor in your corner, that's the easier one to go with. Okay. But one of the things that I've no major concerns with someone who knows what they're doing and knows it's going to be up and down and all over the place, and they know they're not going to need the money for a long time.
Yeah.
I have no major concerns going high risk or higher risk. Okay. My issue with what he said is to de-risk it later on. Okay. So there is a thing out there called glide path, or target dated funds is what they often called, right? But glide path fund is a nice way to describe it. What happens with a glide path fund is as you approach retirement, it starts to reduce the risk that's in your fund. It does it automatically for you. So it might move 20% a year for the last 5 years before retirement. And what happens then is the day you retire, you now have the least amount of risk on the table. Yeah. So that if the markets blow up the year before you retire, you won't get a big shock on the day you retire.
Yeah.
The problem with it is that the day after you've retired, you're now 65, and you've got now all of a sudden you've got a 35-year time horizon for yourself again. And you're going, if I leave this all in low risk, my money's not going to last to 100 years of age. Yeah. And we always pick 100. There's a reason, right? Yeah. Just a statistical reason why we built a plan to 100 years of age. So what you have to do is you have to load the risk back up on it again. And they're called glide paths because it's like a plane. It comes into landing, right? Just before you retire, so you're safe on the ground. Yeah. But then the day you retire, you have to take off again, right? What's the riskiest part of flying? Take off and landing. Yeah. When you pull in all of that risk on yourself, the day you retire, remember that when you're 30, you have 70 years to go to 100 years, years of age. When you're 60, you have 40 years to go. It's not this big D-Day that people think it is. Yeah. There is reasons why you want to protect your money just before retirement, but it's not a big deal, right? Yeah. And get good advice on that. I'm not a fan of target dated or glide path funds. I am a fan of getting good, proper, specific advice for yourself. Yeah. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Was that a bit of a whistle-stop tour for you in terms of pensions and stuff? for the teenager inside you, Sarah.
Like, Sarah,
come on. drag you into adulthood, Sarah.
Sarah, I'm fighting it with all my strength.
Tell me about the questions you'd like to get in. Tell us about the questions that you're looking for. Are you looking for generic stuff? Do you want specific stuff?
Yeah. Well, I just think people looking for advice like that, I think questions like that are really good because I'm sure there's people out there. And the first question, having two pensions, like I'd say a lot of people have questions like that. So even if you're an everyday person and you don't have massive, major financial crisis or anything going on and you just want some advice, we'd love to hear it and we'd love to, help people out. But we'd love if you have other stuff going on and you would love specific advice on specific scenarios. Okay.
So you're happy to take generic stuff. Yes. You're just across the board
whatever
or specific. And we're also looking for people to suggest that they come on themselves as a guest. Yeah. And I do think the real people make a difference, don't they?
Definitely, yeah.
And you're reaching out to a lot of them and you're talking to them and you're kind of collating them all together and say, right, this one drops into that episode and that one drops into that episode. Yeah. How do people get in touch with you?
So get in touch with us via WhatsApp and voice note, please. We love to hear all of our listeners. And the number is 087 291 0507. And also if you have any suggestions of topics you'd like to hear covered.
Great. If anyone's watching this instead of listening to this, they'll notice that you and I looked down there a minute ago, didn't they? Because you still have it written up.
I will. The next episode, I'll be looking up.
And you'll know what it is. Okay,
I'll
Sarah.
have it tattooed on my arm or something.
Sarah, thank you very much for coming in. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.